I thought my sister's wedding would be the happiest day of our lives. I was wrong. It was the day I discovered who my family really was. The sound of applause filled the elegant ballroom as Emily twirled in her $15,000 designer gown, but all I could hear was the echo of my mother's hand connecting with my face. Let me back up and tell you how we got here. My name is Madison, and for 32 years I've been the reliable one, the one who sacrificed her spring break to work extra shifts so Emily could go to Cancun with her sorority sisters. The one who gave up her dream internship in New York because Mom needed help with Dad's medical bills. The one who quietly transferred money into the family account every month without being asked. 2 years ago, I finally did something for myself. After climbing the corporate ladder at a tech startup and landing a 6-figure salary, I bought my dream penthouse downtown. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, marble countertops, and a rooftop terrace that made me feel like I was on top of the world. It cost me every penny of my savings, my annual bonus, and a mortgage that would keep me working for the next 20 years. But it was mine. Emily had always been the golden child. 3 years younger, blessed with Dad's blue eyes and Mom's perfect bone structure, she sailed through life with the kind of effortless grace I'd never possessed. While I was buried in spreadsheets and client presentations, Emily was pursuing her artistic journey, a photography hobby funded entirely by our parents' retirement savings. Not that anyone kept track of those details. When Emily announced her engagement to Brad Whitmore III, heir to a commercial real estate empire, our parents practically threw a parade. Brad's family owned half the shopping centers in our state, and suddenly Emily wasn't just the pretty daughter anymore. She was the meal ticket. The wedding planning consumed our family for 8 months. Every conversation revolved around flowers, venues, and the guest list that seemed to grow daily as Mom and Dad tried to impress Brad's influential relatives. I genuinely wanted to be happy for my sister. I helped address invitations, drove Emily to dress fittings, and even paid for the bridesmaids' luncheon when the budget mysteriously ran short. But somewhere between the third venue change and the demand for imported Italian linens, I started noticing things. Little comments during family dinners. Madison, you have all that space in your penthouse just going to waste. Or my personal favorite. It's such a shame when people have more than they need while family goes without. The irony wasn't lost on me that this came from parents who'd just spent $3,000 on wedding favors. The hints became less subtle as the wedding approached. Dad would mention how expensive it was for young couples to find housing in the city. Mom would sigh dramatically about how Emily and Brad were starting from nothing, conveniently forgetting that Brad's trust fund could buy my penthouse 10 times over. Emily herself never said anything directly, but I caught her measuring glances when she visited my place, the way she'd run her fingers along my granite countertops and comment on how lucky I was to live alone. 3 weeks before the wedding, during what was supposed to be a casual family dinner, Mom finally dropped the pretense. Madison, honey, we need to discuss your living situation. I looked up from my pasta. My living situation? Well, you're 32 and single, she continued as if being unmarried was a medical condition. Emily and Brad are going to need somewhere stable to start their lives together. That little apartment Brad's parents found them is so cramped. It's a 3-bedroom condo in the best part of downtown, I replied. I've seen the listing. It's beautiful. But your penthouse would be so much better for entertaining, Emily chimed in, speaking directly to me for the first time all evening. Brad's family does a lot of business dinners. The audacity took my breath away. Are you asking me to sell my home? Not sell, Dad interjected quickly. Just transfer ownership. Keep it in the family. You could find a nice 1-bedroom somewhere. I stared at them, waiting for the punchline. When none came, I realized they were serious. You want me to give Emily my penthouse? It's not giving, Mom said, her voice taking on that patient tone she used when she thought I was being deliberately obtuse. It's sharing, family shares. I bought that penthouse with my own money. I've been paying the mortgage for 2 years. Money we helped you earn by giving you a stable home to grow up in, Dad shot back. By paying for your education, your clothes, your food for 18 years. You don't exist in a vacuum, Madison. The conversation spiraled from there. Every sacrifice I'd made, every dollar I'd contributed to family emergencies, every time I'd put their needs before my own. None of it mattered. What mattered was that Emily needed something I had, and good daughters shared with their sisters. I left that dinner with a sick feeling in my stomach and a crystal clear understanding of my place in this family. I was the provider, not the person, the ATM, not the daughter. The morning of Emily's wedding dawned picture perfect. Cloudless sky, gentle breeze, the kind of day that made photographers weep with joy. I arrived at the venue early to help with last-minute details, pushing down the knot of anxiety that had lived in my chest since that dinner 3 weeks ago. The Whitmore family had spared no expense. The ballroom at the Four Seasons was transformed into something out of a fairy tale, with thousands of white roses and enough crystal chandeliers to power a small city. Emily looked radiant in her gown, and for a moment I almost forgot about the tension simmering beneath the surface. The ceremony was beautiful. Emily cried the perfect amount, enough to show emotion, not enough to ruin her makeup. Brad looked appropriately overwhelmed by his good fortune. Our parents beamed from the front row like they'd personally arranged the match. I stood in my bridesmaid dress, smiled for the cameras, and pretended my heart wasn't breaking. The reception was in full swing when it happened. Dinner had been served, the speeches had been given, and Emily and Brad were making their rounds to thank guests. I was talking to my college roommate about her new job when Mom appeared at my elbow. "Madison, we need to speak with you. Now." The urgency in her voice made my stomach drop. "Is everything okay?" "Just come with us." Dad had materialized on my other side, and together they guided me away from the crowd toward a quiet alcove near the bar. "What's going on?" I asked, but I already knew, the way they'd positioned themselves blocking my escape route, the way Mom kept glancing back at the reception, making sure we weren't being overheard, the way Dad's jaw was set in that stubborn line I knew so well. "We've been thinking about our conversation from a few weeks ago," Mom began. "The one where you asked me to give away my home? That conversation?" "Don't be dramatic," Dad said. "We're asking you to do what's right for this family." "Emily and Brad need that penthouse," Mom continued. "They're starting their lives together, and they deserve the best possible foundation." I looked between them, these people who had raised me, who had taught me about right and wrong, who were now asking me to voluntarily make myself homeless for the sake of their favorite child. "No," I said simply. The word hung in the air between us like a challenge. "Excuse me?" Mom's voice went dangerously quiet. I said no. "I'm not giving Emily my penthouse. It's my home. I bought it. I pay for it. The answer is no." Dad's face flushed red. "After everything we've done for you?" "After everything I've done for this family," I corrected. "Do you have any idea how much money I've given you over the years? Emily's spring break trips, your medical bills, the down payment for this wedding venue when you came up short?" "That's what family does," Mom snapped. "We help each other." "Right. So when do I get help? When does someone sacrifice for me?" "You're being selfish." Emily's voice cut through our heated whispers. She had appeared behind our parents, still glowing from her wedding high, but with something sharp in her eyes. "This is supposed to be the happiest day of my life, and you're ruining it with your greed." "My greed?" The laugh that escaped me sounded bitter even to my own ears. "Emily, your wedding dress cost more than most people's cars. Your husband's family owns half the commercial real estate in this state, but somehow I'm the greedy one for wanting to keep the home I bought with my own money." "You don't need all that space," she shot back. "You're 32 and single. What are you going to do, become a crazy cat lady?" The casual cruelty of it hit harder than a slap. This was my baby sister, the girl I'd protected from bullies, helped with homework, cheered for at every school play and soccer game. The girl who apparently saw me as nothing more than an obstacle between her and what she wanted. "I can't believe you," I whispered. "We raised you better than this," Mom said, her voice rising despite our proximity to the reception. A few guests had started to glance our way. We taught you about family, about loyalty. You taught me that I don't matter, I interrupted. You taught me that my job is to give and give until there's nothing left, and then give some more. Stop being so dramatic, Dad hissed. We're asking you to share, not to sacrifice your firstborn. Share? My voice cracked. When has this family ever shared anything with me? When Emily wanted to go to art school, who paid for it? When she needed a car, who co-signed the loan? When she wanted to live in that expensive apartment downtown during college, who covered the rent difference? That's different, Mom started. How is it different? How is any of this different except that now you want something I actually care about? Emily stepped closer, her wedding dress rustling with each movement. I thought you loved me. The manipulation was so blatant it took my breath away. I do love you. That's why I've spent my entire adult life putting your needs before my own. But apparently, that's not enough. Apparently, I have to give up my home too. It's just a place to live, she said dismissively. It's my place to live, the first thing I've ever had that was truly mine. Well, maybe it's time you learned that nothing belongs to just one person in a family, Mom said coldly. Then where's Brad's contribution to this family sharing? What's he giving up? The question hung in the air unanswered because we all knew the truth. Brad wasn't expected to give up anything. Brad was the prize Emily had won, not a resource to be exploited. You're being impossible, Mom declared. Absolutely impossible. After everything we've done. After everything you've done? I felt something snap inside me. Mom, I've been financially supporting this family since I was 25 years old. I've never missed a birthday, never skipped a holiday, never said no when you needed help. But asking me to give away my home crosses a line. There are no lines in family, she said, and her voice had gone cold in a way that made my skin crawl. Then maybe that's the problem. The slap came out of nowhere. One moment I was standing there, trying to make them understand why their request was unreasonable. The next, my head was snapped to the side, my cheek burning, and my grandmother's antique pearl earring was flying across the floor to land near someone's discarded cocktail napkin. The sound echoed through our little alcove like a gunshot. Conversations nearby stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned, phones appeared, no doubt already recording. I touched my cheek, feeling the heat spreading across my skin, and looked at my mother. Really looked at her. At the woman who had slapped me at my sister's wedding in front of 50 guests because I wouldn't give away my home. Madison, Emily started, but I held up my hand. No. My voice came out steady, which surprised me. No, we're done here. I bent down and picked up my earring, aware that at least a dozen people were watching this family drama unfold. When I straightened up, I looked each of them in the eye. Congratulations on your wedding, Emily. I hope you get everything you deserve. The words carried more weight than they'd intended, but I didn't care anymore. I turned and walked away, leaving them standing there in their expensive formal wear, looking like the entitled strangers they'd apparently always been. Madison, wait! Emily called after me. Where are you going? This is my wedding day. I stopped and turned back one last time. You're right. This is your wedding day. The day you get married, start your new life, and apparently, try to take mine. Congratulations. I hope it's everything you dreamed it would be. Then I walked out of that ballroom, past the concerned faces of family friends and distant relatives, past the elaborate floral arrangements and crystal chandeliers, and straight to my car. I sat in the parking lot for exactly 30 seconds before I pulled out my phone and made a call. James, it's Madison. Are you busy right now? Never too busy for you. What's wrong? You sound upset. I need a favor, a big one. Can you meet me somewhere? Of course. Where? I gave him the address of the Four Seasons and took a deep breath. How quickly can you get here? 20 minutes. Madison, what's going on? I'll explain when you arrive. Just, when you get here, you're going to meet my family. And James, I need you to be exactly who you are. Don't downplay anything. Are you sure about this? I touched my still burning cheek and thought about the look in my mother's eyes when she demanded I hand over my keys. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. I'll be right there." I hung up and sat in my car, watching through the windows as the reception continued without me. Emily was back on the dance floor, spinning in her perfect dress, surrounded by people celebrating her perfect day. My parents were mingling with Brad's family, no doubt smoothing over any awkwardness from our public confrontation. They thought they knew me. They thought I was the same pushover who would eventually cave to their demands, who would choose family peace over personal boundaries, who would sacrifice anything to avoid conflict. They were about to learn how wrong they were. In exactly 1 hour, a man would walk into that reception, and when my mother saw who it was, everything would change. Because while my family had been busy underestimating me, I'd been building a life they knew nothing about, making connections they couldn't fathom, becoming someone they'd never bothered to get to know. The girl who gave up her spring break was gone. The woman who handed over her bonus money without question was done. The daughter who absorbed their criticism and converted it into compliance had finally reached her limit. They wanted to see what I was really worth. They were about to find out, and something told me they weren't going to like the answer. 23 minutes later, I watched through the ballroom windows as a black Tesla Model S pulled into the valet station. Even from a distance, I could see the way the valets straightened their posture, the way they handled the car with extra care. When James stepped out, adjusting his charcoal Tom Ford suit, I felt a flutter of satisfaction mixed with nervousness. James Morrison looked exactly like what he was, a man who'd built a tech empire from nothing and now controlled more wealth than most small countries. At 38, he carried himself with the quiet confidence that came from never having to prove anything to anyone. Silver threaded through his dark hair, and when he smiled, which wasn't often in business settings, it was the kind of smile that made Fortune 500 CEOs nervous. What my family didn't know was that James had been my mentor for 3 years. What they really didn't know was that the startup I worked for was actually a subsidiary of Morrison Industries, and the 6-figure salary I'd mentioned was significantly understated. James had taken me under his wing after I'd caught a major financial discrepancy that saved his company $12 million. Our relationship had evolved from professional respect to something deeper, though we'd kept it private for obvious reasons. He spotted me in the parking lot and walked over, his expression shifting from business neutral to genuine concern when he saw my face. "Jesus, Madison, what happened to your cheek?" "My mother's idea of family negotiation," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "Thanks for coming." "Of course." He studied my face with the intensity he usually reserved for board meetings. "Tell me what you need." I took a deep breath. "I need you to be James Morrison, CEO of Morrison Industries. I need you to walk into that reception and make it very clear that harming me was a serious mistake." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "Your family doesn't know about us." "They don't know about anything. They think I'm some mid-level tech worker who got lucky with real estate. They have no idea that I've been consulting for Morrison Industries, or that Brad's father has been desperately trying to land a contract with your development arm." James's expression went cold in a way that made me grateful I was on his side. "Richard Whitmore has been calling my office twice a week for 6 months. Then you know how important this contract is to his business. Madison, are you asking me to? I'm asking you to make it clear that I'm not someone they can slap around without consequences. What you do with that information is entirely up to you." He nodded slowly. "What's the story? How do you want me to play this?" "Business partner, mentor, someone who values me enough to show up when I call." I paused. "Someone who doesn't appreciate seeing me disrespected." "That last part won't require any acting." He offered me his arm. "Shall we go remind your family who they're dealing with?" Walking back into that ballroom felt like entering enemy territory, but having James beside me changed everything. Conversations paused as we made our way through the crowd. James commanded attention without trying. It was something about the way he moved, the way he seemed to own whatever space he occupied. I spotted my parents first, standing near the head table with Richard and Catherine Whitmore, Brad's parents. Emily and Brad were on the dance floor, but I could see Emily's eyes tracking our progress across the room. The look of confusion on her face would have been amusing under different circumstances. "Mr. and Mrs. Patterson?" James's voice carried just enough authority to cut through the ambient noise without seeming aggressive. My parents turned, and I watched their expressions shift from irritation at being interrupted to uncertainty when they saw who was addressing them. "Yes," Dad replied cautiously. "James Morrison." He extended his hand with the same casual confidence he used in billion-dollar negotiations. "I need to speak with you about your daughter." The name clearly meant nothing to my parents, but Richard Whitmore's reaction was immediate and dramatic. His face went pale, then flushed, then pale again in the span of 3 seconds. "James Morrison?" he repeated, his voice climbing an octave. "Of Morrison Industries?" "That's right." James's tone was pleasant but professional. "I believe you've been trying to reach my office." The silence that followed was deafening. Catherine Whitmore looked between her husband and James like she was watching a tennis match. My parents still seemed confused, but Emily had stopped dancing entirely and was staring at us from across the room. "Mr. Morrison," Richard stammered. "I had no idea you'd be here. If I'd known—" "You'd have made sure your family didn't publicly assault my business partner?" James's voice remained conversational, but there was steel underneath. "Because I have to tell you, Richard, what I witnessed in that parking lot was deeply concerning." "Witnessed?" Mom found her voice, though it came out smaller than usual. "I saw the aftermath of someone laying hands on Madison. I saw her leaving what should have been a celebration with a handprint on her face." He paused, letting that sink in. "I'm hoping there's a reasonable explanation for why someone would think it's acceptable to strike a woman I consider both a valued colleague and personal friend." The word friend carried implications that weren't lost on anyone present. Richard looked like he might faint. Dad's mouth opened and closed without producing sound. Mom stared at James as if he might disappear if she blinked hard enough. There's been a misunderstanding," Dad finally managed. "I'm sure there has been." James's smile was razor thin. "Madison mentioned something about a property dispute? I have to admit, I'm curious about the details. You see, Madison's been instrumental in several major acquisitions for Morrison Industries. Her financial analysis and property evaluation skills have saved us millions. So when she mentions real estate issues, I pay attention." She works for you?" Emily had approached the group, her wedding dress trailing behind her like a royal train. Up close, I could see the confusion and growing alarm in her eyes. "Madison is one of our most valuable consultants," James replied smoothly. "Has been for 3 years. Her insights into commercial real estate markets have been particularly invaluable. In fact, we've been discussing expanding her role significantly." Richard made a sound that might have been a whimper. The Morrison Industries Commercial Development Division was legendary in our city. They had the power to transform entire neighborhoods with a single project. Every developer in the state wanted a piece of their action. "Perhaps," James continued, "we should discuss this property matter privately. I'd hate for a family disagreement to impact our professional relationship, but Madison's well-being is important to me. Very important." The threat was elegant and understated, but unmistakable. Richard's commercial real estate empire depended on relationships with exactly the kind of clients that Morrison Industries could provide. If James decided that the Whitmore family was problematic— "There's really no need for that," Mom said quickly. "This was just a small family misunderstanding." "Small?" James raised an eyebrow. "Madison called me from a parking lot with a red handprint on her face asking for help. That doesn't sound small to me." Brad had materialized beside Emily, looking confused and increasingly worried as he picked up on his father's obvious distress. "Is everything all right here?" "That depends," James said pleasantly, "on whether your family believes it's acceptable to physically assault successful businesswomen over property disputes." "Assault?" Brad's voice cracked slightly. "What's he talking about?" Emily grabbed her new husband's arm. "It wasn't assault. Mom just— Madison was being unreasonable about her penthouse, and things got heated." "Heated," James repeated thoughtfully. "Is that what we're calling domestic violence these days?" The word violence hung in the air like a bomb. Several nearby guests had stopped pretending not to listen. I could see phones appearing, recording what was obviously becoming a major scene at what should have been a perfect society wedding. "Now see here," Dad started, but James cut him off with a look. No, I think I've seen enough. Madison, we should probably discuss this situation with legal counsel. Assault charges aside, if there are property disputes affecting one of our key consultants, Morrison Industries may need to take a more active interest. Richard made a strangled noise. Legal counsel? Well, obviously. When someone attacks a Morrison Industries consultant over real estate holdings, it becomes a corporate matter. We protect our people, Richard. Surely you understand that. The dominoes were falling faster than I'd expected. Richard's face had gone gray, and I could practically see him calculating the financial devastation that would result from losing the Morrison Industries relationship he'd been desperately courting. Perhaps, Richard said carefully, we could resolve this without involving lawyers. I'm sure this whole thing has been blown out of proportion. Has it? James looked directly at my mother. Mrs. Patterson, did you or did you not strike Madison tonight? The question was simple and direct, with no room for evasion. Mom looked around desperately, as if someone might rescue her, but found only watching faces and recording phones. She was being stubborn about a reasonable family request. That's not what I asked. Did you strike her? It was barely a slap, so that's a yes. James pulled out his phone. I should probably document this for our legal team. Wait! Emily stepped forward, her perfect composure finally cracking. Please, Mr. Morrison, this is my wedding day. Can't we work this out without involving lawyers and whatever this is turning into? James looked at her with the same expression he used on incompetent board members. Emily, isn't it? Here's the thing about working things out. It requires acknowledging that something went wrong in the first place. What I'm hearing is a lot of excuses and minimization, but no accountability. What do you want us to do? Brad asked desperately. His father had moved closer and was whispering urgently in his ear, probably explaining exactly how catastrophic this situation could become for their family business. That's not up to me, James replied. It's up to Madison. She's the victim here. All eyes turned to me. For 32 years, this family had made decisions about my life without consulting me. They'd determined what I should sacrifice, what I should accept, what I should be grateful for. Now, suddenly, my opinion mattered. The power of that moment was intoxicating. I want an apology, I said quietly. A real one. Not excuses or justifications or explanations about how I somehow deserved to be hit. I want you to acknowledge that what you did was wrong. Madison, Mom started, you have to understand. No. My voice came out stronger than I expected. No more understanding. No more making excuses for you. You slapped me in public because I wouldn't give away my home. That's what happened. Own it. The silence stretched uncomfortably. I could feel the weight of everyone's attention, the phones still recording, the whispered conversations at nearby tables. Emily's perfect wedding had become a referendum on my worth as a human being. I'm sorry, Mom finally whispered. For what? For hitting you. And? She looked confused. And what? And for demanding I give away my home, and for treating me like my only value to this family is what I can provide financially, and for making it clear that Emily's comfort matters more than my basic dignity? Each word hit like a physical blow. I watched my mother's face crumble as the reality of what they'd done finally sank in. Around us, the reception continued, but our little circle had become an island of uncomfortable truth in a sea of celebration. I'm sorry, she said again, tears starting to flow. I'm sorry for all of it. Are you? I studied her face, looking for genuine remorse beneath the damage control. Because this feels like you're sorry you got caught, not sorry for what you did. Madison. Dad stepped forward, his voice pleading. We love you. We've always loved you. We wanted what was best for Emily. At my expense. Always at my expense. That wasn't our intention, wasn't it? I felt 32 years of suppressed anger rising in my throat. When was the last time anyone in this family sacrificed something for me? When was the last time someone put my needs first? When was the last time you asked what I wanted instead of what I could give? The questions hung unanswered because we all knew the truth. The Patterson family dynamic had been established long ago. Madison gives, everyone else takes. James cleared his throat gently. Perhaps this conversation would be better continued privately. Madison, why don't we step outside? I nodded gratefully. The weight of the entire ballroom's attention was becoming overwhelming, and I could see Emily's tears threatening to ruin her carefully applied makeup. One more thing, James said, turning back to my parents. Madison mentioned something about pressure to transfer property ownership. I want to be very clear about this. Any further attempts to coerce her into financial decisions will be treated as a threat against a Morrison Industries consultant. Are we understood? The nods came quickly, desperately. Excellent. Madison, shall we? He offered me his arm again, and we walked out of that ballroom for the second time that evening. But this time, I wasn't fleeing. I was leaving on my own terms, with my dignity intact and my power restored. In the parking lot, James finally allowed his professional mask to slip. How do you feel? He asked, studying my face in the lamplight. Like I can breathe for the first time in years, I admitted. Thank you. For all of that. I know it wasn't easy. Madison, that was the most satisfying business meeting I've had all year. Your family needed to understand who they were dealing with. And now they do. Now they do. He paused. What happens next? I thought about that question as we stood in the parking lot of the Four Seasons, the sounds of Emily's reception drifting through the windows. What did happen next? Now I set boundaries, I said finally. Real ones. No more financial support without clear agreements. No more sacrificing my needs for their wants. No more pretending that family love means accepting abuse. And if they don't respect those boundaries? I thought about the look on my mother's face when she'd slapped me, the casual cruelty in Emily's voice when she'd called me selfish, the way they'd all stood there expecting me to cave to their demands. Then I'll know exactly where I stand with them, and I'll act accordingly. James nodded approvingly. You know, we really should discuss expanding your role at Morrison Industries. I wasn't lying about that. You've been wasted in consulting. I'd like that, I said, surprised by how much I meant it. I'd like that very much. As we talked about my future, a future where my family's opinion of my choices mattered far less than my own satisfaction, I felt something settle in my chest that I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. Behind us, Emily's reception continued. The music played, the guests danced, and somewhere in that ballroom, my family was probably trying to figure out how to salvage their relationships with both me and the Whitmores. But for the first time in my adult life, their problems weren't automatically my problems. Their needs weren't automatically my responsibility. Their disappointment in my choices wasn't automatically my failure. I was done being the family sacrifice. Done being the reliable one who absorbed everyone else's needs at the expense of her own. Done pretending that love meant accepting mistreatment. Tomorrow I would go home to my penthouse, and start building a life based on what I wanted rather than what everyone else expected me to provide. And if my family couldn't accept that version of me, well, that was their loss, not mine. For the first time in 32 years, I was finally free.